My name is Natalie. Every single night, my sister called me with the exact same strange question. Are you alone tonight? I never understood why she cared so much about my living situation. I always told her the truth because I had nothing to hide. But yesterday, I lied. And that one simple lie ended up saving my life. I am 33 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant. I spend my days tracking down financial fraud for massive corporations. It is a dangerous job tracking missing millions, which is why I never ignored a gut feeling. It was exactly 11 at night when my phone lit up. The caller ID flashed Brittany. I stared at the glowing screen in the dark living room. My sister always called at this exact time. I answered, and before I could even say a simple hello, her sharp, impatient voice cut through the silence. Are you alone tonight, Natalie? Usually I would just sigh and tell her yes so she would get off my back. But tonight the house felt different. Just seconds before the phone rang, I thought I heard a strange metallic scraping sound echoing up from the basement. It was faint, but unmistakable. So instead of my usual obedient answer, I lied. I told her no. I said the kitchen pipes burst and an emergency plumber was over fixing them right now. To make it convincing, I added that he seemed pretty intimidating and carried a registered firearm for his late-night emergency shifts. The line went dead immediately. Brittany did not say goodbye. She did not ask if my house was flooding or if my property was ruined. She just hung up the phone. The abruptness sent an ice-cold chill down my spine. My professional instincts kicked into high gear. In forensic accounting, you learn very quickly that when people suddenly break their established patterns, they are usually hiding something massive. I did not hesitate. I immediately grabbed my tablet and pulled up the hidden security camera feeds. I had installed discrete military-grade cameras all around my property months ago due to the sensitive nature of my corporate investigations. No one in my family knew they existed. I switched the view to the basement exterior door at the back of the house. What I saw on that glowing screen made the blood freeze completely in my veins. The heavy wooden door to my cellar burst open. A tall figure stumbled out into the freezing Chicago night. It was Jamal, my sister's husband. Jamal was an African-American real estate developer who constantly bragged about his massive multi-million-dollar projects at every single family gathering. He wore custom-tailored suits and drove luxury imported cars. But right now, on my grainy infrared security feed, he was wearing a cheap black hoodie pulled tight over his head, and in his right hand he was clutching a massive pair of industrial bolt cutters. He sprinted across my frozen lawn, slipping on the ice, and threw himself into his black Range Rover parked illegally down the dark street. The tires screeched violently as he sped away into the night. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever caught a toxic family member in a massive lie. You will want to hear exactly how I turned the tables on them. I sat alone in the dark, staring at the paused video frame of Jamal holding those heavy bolt cutters. My hands were visibly shaking. Why would my supposedly wealthy brother-in-law be breaking into my basement in the middle of the night? And why did my sister hang up the exact second I told her there was an armed man inside my house? The timing was absolutely not a coincidence. She was acting as his lookout. All those nights she called to check if I was alone, she was not checking on my well-being. She was probing my security. She was making sure the coast was clear for him. I thought about the recent family dinners where Brittany would constantly belittle my career. She always told our parents that my job as an auditor was boring and low class compared to Jamal and his booming real estate empire. My parents always ate it up. They treated Brittany like the golden child who married the perfect, successful man. Meanwhile, they treated me like the pathetic single sister living alone in the old house our grandmother refused to leave to them. I realized I could not just sit there shaking in the dark. I needed to know exactly what Jamal was trying to cut open. I grabbed the heavy metal flashlight from my kitchen drawer and slowly made my way down the narrow wooden stairs to the basement. The air down there was damp and freezing. The single overhead bulb flickered as I scanned the room. At first glance, everything looked perfectly normal. The old winter coats were still packed away. But then I saw the drywall behind the old furnace. Someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. Pieces of white plaster were scattered across the concrete floor. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight into the dark, jagged hole. I knew whatever was hidden inside the foundation of my own home was the reason my family was secretly targeting me. The real estate mogul was desperate for something in my basement, and I was going to find out what. I knelt on the cold concrete floor and directed the bright beam of my flashlight straight into the jagged opening. The heavy scent of plaster dust and damp earth filled the air. My grandmother left me this house 5 years ago. It was a beautiful old Victorian home that my parents fought bitterly to get their hands on. They wanted to sell it immediately to fund Jamal and his flashy real estate ventures. But my grandmother knew better. She trusted me completely. She always warned me that my parents measured love in dollar signs, and that my sister measured her worth by what she could take from others. She gave me this house to ensure I always had a safe sanctuary away from their toxic manipulation. Now, staring into the broken wall, I realized my grandmother had hidden a secret compartment down here. But what was inside did not belong to her. Wedged tightly between the old wooden studs was a heavy steel wall safe. It was completely concealed behind the drywall until tonight. Jamal had smashed through the thick plaster with a sledgehammer. He had used those massive bolt cutters to try and snap the thick steel hinges of the safe door. He was absolutely desperate to get inside. But because I lied about the armed plumber, he panicked and ran before he could finish the job. The metal hinges were severely warped and bent outward from his brute force attack. He had done the hard work for me. I grabbed a heavy iron crowbar from my own toolbox on the workbench. I wedged it deep into the damaged gap Jamal had created. With a massive heave, I threw all my weight against the cold iron bar. The metal groaned loudly and snapped. The heavy steel door swung open, crashing against the wooden beams. A cloud of stale dust billowed out into the freezing basement. I shined my flashlight inside, expecting to see old jewelry or forgotten family heirlooms. Instead, I found stacks of crisp manila folders, thick envelopes, and shiny plastic cards bound tightly together with thick rubber bands. My heart pounded against my ribs as I reached inside the dark metal box. I pulled out the first stack of cards. The flashlight beam reflected off the embossed silver lettering. They were high-limit platinum credit cards from 3 different major banks. I squinted in the dim light to read the name printed on the bottom of the first card, Natalie Evans. I grabbed the next card, Natalie Evans. Every single credit card in that thick stack bore my exact legal name. My hands began to tremble, but my mind instantly shifted into audit mode. I dropped the plastic cards and ripped open the thick manila folders. Inside were official state registration documents for 5 different limited liability companies. They were elaborate shell companies registered to fake corporate addresses in luxury downtown high-rises. I flipped to the signature pages. There was my name again, but the signatures were perfect forgeries. Someone had meticulously copied the exact way I looped my letters. I opened another heavy envelope. It contained 2 vehicle titles for brand-new Porsche sports utility vehicles. Again, the registered owner was listed as Natalie Evans. The gravity of the situation hit me like a physical blow. Jamal was not breaking into my house to steal from my grandmother. He was breaking in to retrieve his stash of fraudulent documents. He and my sister had completely stolen my identity. They used my pristine credit score to fund their lavish lifestyle. All those designer bags Brittany flaunted online were stolen. The expensive cars Jamal parked in my parents' driveway were stolen. The luxury vacations they constantly bragged about were all paid for using my name, and they hid the paper trail inside the walls of my own house. If the federal agents ever came knocking, the evidence would point directly to me. I sat on the freezing floor, surrounded by the paper evidence of my own financial ruin. Millions of dollars in fraudulent loans were sitting right in my lap. As a forensic accountant, I knew exactly what this meant. If I went to the police right now without a bulletproof case, Jamal would simply claim, "I set up the shell companies myself." He had the money and the ruthless lawyers to destroy me in court. My own parents would gladly testify against me to protect their golden child. I needed to build a flawless trap. I gathered every single document and carried them upstairs to my secure home office. I spent the entire night scanning every page into my encrypted corporate servers. I did not sleep a single wink. By the time I locked the original documents inside my own fireproof biometric safe, the sun was already rising over the Chicago skyline. I walked into the kitchen to make a strong pot of black coffee. My mind was rapidly racing with federal tax codes and legal strategies. But I did not have to wait long for the first battle. Just as the coffee machine beeped loudly, the quiet silence of the early morning was abruptly shattered by angry, violent pounding on my heavy front door. I walked cautiously toward the front entryway. The violent pounding continued, rattling the frosted glass panes of the heavy wooden door. I glanced at the digital clock on the wall. It was exactly 7 in the morning. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. My mother, Susan, pushed past me instantly, without even a simple hello. She marched straight into my kitchen with her designer coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders. My sister Brittany followed close behind her, stepping over my welcome mat in expensive leather boots. And bringing up the rear was Jamal. He was no longer wearing the cheap black hoodie from the security footage. He wore a sharp navy blue business suit, but his eyes were bloodshot with dark, heavy bags under them. He avoided making direct eye contact with me and instead let his gaze wander nervously toward the hallway that led to the basement door. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was wondering if the armed plumber I made up last night had found his secret stash. I closed the front door and crossed my arms over my chest. Before I could even ask why they were ambushing my house, my mother spun around and slammed a thick stack of legal papers onto my granite kitchen counter. The loud smack echoed through the quiet room. "Sign these right now, Natalie," my mother commanded with a cold authority in her voice. She pulled a gold pen from her expensive handbag and slapped it down right next to the papers. I looked at the bold black letters printed across the top page. It was a complete property deed transfer. The document legally surrendered ownership of my grandmother's house entirely to Jamal and his corporate entity. I looked up at my mother, completely disgusted, but carefully hiding my fury. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly flat and devoid of emotion. "It is a temporary transfer." Jamal stepped forward, adjusting his expensive silk tie. His hands were shaking slightly. He cleared his throat, trying to project his usual arrogant confidence. "I have a massive $10 million commercial real estate deal closing on Friday. The bank requires a little more collateral to finalize the underwriting. Your house is fully paid off. We just need to transfer the deed to my holding company for a few weeks to secure the capital. Once the project clears, we will transfer it right back to you." It was a spectacular lie. If I had not spent the entire night scanning his fraudulent shell company documents, I might have believed his corporate jargon. But I knew the truth. He was drowning in debt to dangerous people, and he needed my house to save his own life. "You want me to sign away my only home so you can use it as leverage?" I asked, staring directly into Jamal's bloodshot eyes. Brittany scoffed from the kitchen island. "Do not be dramatic, Natalie. It is just paperwork. Jamal is trying to build a generational empire. You just sit in this old house crunching numbers all day. You do not understand how high-level investments work. If you do not sign those papers, his entire $10 million deal will collapse. You have to help us." My mother tapped her manicured fingernail against the deed transfer. "Your sister is right. We are family and family helps each other. Jamal has been incredibly generous to us. He bought your father that new boat last summer. He takes Brittany on luxury vacations. What do? You hoard this big, empty house all to yourself when you could easily rent a small apartment downtown, closer to your accounting job." I stared at the three of them. My mother, who openly despised me. My sister, who was actively planning to cash in on my life insurance policy. And Jamal, the fake millionaire who spent last night trying to smash open a hidden wall safe in my basement. They stood in my kitchen wearing clothes bought with my stolen credit, demanding my property. Jamal took another step forward, invading my personal space. His voice dropped lower, carrying a subtle edge of desperate aggression. Look, Natalie, we do not have time to argue about this. I need these documents filed with the county clerk by noon today. Just sign the papers. I picked up the heavy gold pen. Brittany smiled smugly, assuming I was caving to their pressure just like I always did when we were kids. My mother let out a loud, dramatic sigh of relief. Jamal leaned in closer, watching the pen hover over the signature line. Instead of signing my name, I tossed the gold pen directly into the trash can. I am not signing anything, I said, looking straight at my mother. This house belongs to me. If Jamal is a brilliant millionaire developer, he can use his own assets for collateral. Now get out of my house before I call the police. The smug smile instantly vanished from my sister's face. Jamal clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white, and my mother's face flushed bright red with pure, unadulterated rage. You selfish, ungrateful little brat! My mother spat the words out like venom. She stepped toward me, pointing a trembling finger right at my face. After everything this family has done for you, this is how you repay us. By actively trying to sabotage your sister and her husband. I did not flinch. You have done absolutely nothing for me, Mother. Grandmother gave me this house because she knew you would try to bleed me dry the first chance you got. She knew exactly how greedy you were. That was the exact trigger Brittany needed to start her performance. The fake tears started instantly. Her lower lip quivered and she buried her face into Jamal's shoulder, sobbing loudly. Why are you doing this to me, Natalie? Brittany wailed, her voice echoing in my kitchen. You are just jealous. You have always been so incredibly jealous of my perfect marriage and my beautiful life. You cannot stand the fact that Jamal is a highly successful entrepreneur while you are just a miserable, lonely accountant crunching numbers in a cubicle. You are refusing to sign that paper just to punish me for being happy. It was a brilliant theatrical performance. If I did not have her fraudulent loan documents sitting in my fireproof safe upstairs, I might have almost felt a shred of guilt. But knowing she was actively trying to steal my house while holding a $2 million life insurance policy on my head made her tears look incredibly pathetic. She was a monster hiding behind expensive makeup. I am not jealous of your life, Brittany, I said calmly, standing my ground. I just prefer to keep the things that legally belong to me. Jamal pushed Brittany gently aside. His fake calm demeanor was completely gone. The desperate cornered animal I saw on the security camera last night was starting to bleed through his expensive tailored suit. He took 2 large, aggressive steps toward me, backing me up against the kitchen counter. He towered over me, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me into submission. Let us talk about last night, Natalie, Jamal said, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. You told Brittany you had an emergency plumber over at 11 o'clock at night. That is a very strange time for a routine maintenance call. Who exactly was this guy? He was testing the waters. He was desperately trying to figure out if I went down to the basement last night and if I saw him smashing the wall. A pipe burst. I lied smoothly, maintaining direct eye contact. I had to call an emergency service. Water was leaking everywhere. Jamal narrowed his eyes. A bead of sweat formed on his forehead despite the cool temperature in my kitchen. Where was the leak exactly? He asked, probing for details. Did he have to go down into the basement? Did you go down there with him? I watched the terrified anticipation in his dark eyes. He was holding his breath, waiting for my answer. I decided to play with him just a little bit. Yes, it was in the basement, I replied slowly. Right behind the old furnace. The plumber said someone had done some serious damage to the drywall down there. Jamal visibly paled. His jaw clenched tight, and he quickly shoved his hands into his suit pockets so I would not see them shaking. Damage, Jamal repeated nervously, clearing his throat. What kind of damage? Did he see anything else down there? Did you look inside the wall? No, I said, shrugging my shoulders as if I did not care at all. The plumber patched the pipe and left. I was too tired to inspect the drywall in the dark. I figured I would just hire a professional contractor to look at it next week when I have some free time. The massive sigh of relief that escaped Jamal's lips was almost comical. He truly believed he was in the clear. He thought his hidden safe was still completely undiscovered, and that I was just a naive, oblivious woman who knew nothing about his massive financial crimes. "Well, you should not have strange men in your house that late at night," Jamal said, trying to regain his dominant posture. "It is not safe for a woman living alone. Now stop playing games and sign the deed transfer, Natalie. I need that collateral by noon, or my investors will walk away. I already gave you my answer," I said, my voice hardening into solid steel. "I am not signing your papers. I am not funding your fake real estate empire, and if you ever show up at my house unannounced again, I will have you arrested for trespassing." My mother gasped loudly, pressing her hand to her chest in mock horror. "You are completely insane. You are destroying this family over pure spite. Get out," I commanded, pointing straight at the front door. "All three of you, right now before I dial the police." Jamal glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. He grabbed the deed transfer off the counter and shoved it roughly into his leather briefcase. "You are making a massive mistake, Natalie. You have no idea what is at stake here. I will not let you ruin my deal. We are done with you." Brittany hissed, wiping her fake tears away instantly. "Do not ever call us again. Call us." "I promise you I will not," I replied. I followed them closely to the front entryway and watched as they angrily marched down my front steps. Jamal practically shoved Brittany into the passenger seat of his black Range Rover before speeding off down the street. I locked the deadbolt and leaned against the heavy wood. I had successfully kicked them out without revealing my hand. But as I walked back into my quiet house, I knew the psychological warfare was only just beginning. I watched Jamal's black Range Rover disappear around the corner before I finally allowed myself to exhale. But I knew I did not have time to sit around and celebrate winning the morning argument. I had to verify the exact extent of the financial damage. I grabbed my wool coat and my car keys. I drove straight to the main branch of my bank downtown. The morning traffic was heavy, but my mind was moving much faster than the cars around me. I needed official bank records to match the documents I found in my basement. I walked into the grand marble lobby of the bank and bypassed the teller line completely. I went straight to the glass office of the branch manager, Mr. Harrison. He had known me for years. He managed my grandmother's estate and knew my financial history was absolutely flawless. I knocked once and walked in. When Mr. Harrison saw me, his face instantly dropped. He did not offer his usual warm smile. He nervously adjusted his glasses and quickly closed the folder on his mahogany desk. "Natalie," he said, his voice tight with anxiety. "I was just about to call you. Our fraud department flagged your accounts early this morning." I sat down in the leather chair across from him and crossed my legs. "Pull up my credit profile," I said, keeping my voice completely steady. "Tell me exactly how bad it is." Mr. Harrison turned his computer monitor around so I could see the screen. "I am so sorry, Natalie," he whispered. "Your credit score was an immaculate 810 just 3 months ago. Today it is sitting at 412. It is completely destroyed." I stared at the red numbers flashing on the screen. Even though I knew it was coming, seeing the actual destruction of my financial identity was a heavy blow. "Walk me through the active liabilities," I commanded, slipping effortlessly into my professional forensic accounting persona. I needed him to see that I was not a crying victim. I was an auditor gathering facts. He clicked his mouse, opening a terrifying spreadsheet of debt. 3 months ago, someone initiated a massive line of commercial credit using your exact social security number and verified digital signatures. They opened 5 different corporate accounts under your name. The total outstanding debt across these accounts is $1.2 million. None of the minimum monthly payments have been made. They are all officially in default as of yesterday. I nodded slowly, processing the timeline. 3 months ago was exactly when my parents insisted I come over for a family weekend dinner, and I foolishly left my purse unattended in their kitchen. Jamal had all the time he needed to photograph my identification and social security card. What else? I asked, refusing to break eye contact with the screen. Mr. Harrison swallowed hard. There are 2 brand-new Porsche vehicles leased directly in your name. The dealership financing department just issued a repossession order because the first 3 payments bounced. But that is not the worst part, Natalie. He pulled a thick legal document from his desk drawer and slid it across the polished wood. The commercial lenders are accelerating the debt collection. Because you signed as the primary guarantor for the $1.2 million, they are moving to seize your personal assets to cover the massive losses. I looked down at the paper. It was a pre-lien notification. They are coming after my house, I stated. It's the house my grandmother left me. Yes, Mr. Harrison replied softly. The legal department is preparing to place a hard lien on your property by the end of the week. Once that happens, they can force a foreclosure sale to recoup their money. Natalie, you need to file a massive police report right now. You need to declare identity theft and freeze everything. If you do not, you will lose your home and face total bankruptcy. The puzzle pieces violently slammed together in my mind. That was exactly why Jamal was so absolutely desperate to get my signature on the deed transfer this morning. He knew the bank was preparing to seize the house. If the house was still in my name, the bank would take it and discover his fraudulent loans attached to it. But if he transferred the deed to his own holding company, he could legally shield the property from my creditors. He was trying to steal my grandmother's house right out from under me before the bank locked it down. He created the financial fire and then tried to steal the only fire extinguisher. Do not freeze the accounts yet, I said, standing up from the leather chair. Mr. Harrison looked at me like I was completely insane. Natalie, they are going to take everything you own. You are liable for over $1 million. If I freeze the accounts now, the perpetrators will know I am onto them, I explained coldly. I need 48 hours, Mr. Harrison. Do not let the fraud department issue the final lien until Friday morning. I am a forensic accountant. I know exactly who did this, and I am currently compiling the federal evidence to put them away in prison for a very long time. Mr. Harrison stared at me, his mouth slightly open in shock. He slowly nodded and turned the monitor back around. You have 48 hours, Natalie. But after that, my hands are tied. I thanked him and walked out of the bank. The cold Chicago wind hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk. Jamal thought he was a brilliant criminal mastermind. He thought he could ruin my life and steal my inheritance without any consequences. But he made one fatal mistake. He stole the identity of a woman whose entire career was built on destroying financial criminals. I sat behind the steering wheel in the bank parking lot. The engine was running, but I did not pull out. Before I could put on my seatbelt, my cell phone began vibrating aggressively. The caller ID flashed my father's name, Richard. I took a deep breath and answered, putting him on speakerphone. What the hell is wrong with you, Natalie? My father roared, his voice thick with rage. Your mother just called me completely in tears. She said you threw your sister and Jamal out of your house when they came for a simple business favor. It was not a favor, Dad, I replied, keeping my tone measured. Jamal demanded I sign the deed to my house over to his holding company. He is trying to save a massive real estate deal. My father shouted, cutting me off. A deal that will secure your sister's financial future forever. You have no idea how the corporate world works because you sit in a cubicle looking at spreadsheets. Jamal is a visionary elevating this entire family. And all he asked was for you to put up that old drafty house as collateral. A house that was handed to you on a silver platter. Grandmother gave me this house because she wanted me to have it. I fired back, gripping the leather steering wheel. Your grandmother was losing her mind at the end. My father spat back fiercely. She was not in her right senses when she bypassed your mother and me. We let it slide because we felt sorry for you. But if you use that house to sabotage your sister's marriage, we will take it back. I let out a harsh laugh. You cannot take it back. The deed is in my name. Watch me." My father sneered, his voice dropping into a threatening octave. "I will hire the best estate lawyers in Chicago. I will drag you into probate court and contest the will. I will bring in medical experts to testify that your grandmother had severe dementia. I will tie that house up in litigation for 10 years and bleed you dry with legal fees. You will not have a dime left. All you have to do is sign the transfer document and help Jamal. Do not make me destroy you, Natalie." As his toxic words echoed through the car, the screen of my phone lit up with a high-priority email notification. The sender was the legal compliance department of my personal bank. Not the fraud division I just visited, but the department handling my actual checking and savings accounts. "Hold on," I said, staring at the bold red subject line. "I am not holding on." My father yelled, "You are going to apologize to Jamal right now." I ignored him and tapped the email to open it. My eyes quickly scanned the legal jargon. A heavy knot formed in my stomach as I read the terrifying details. Jamal high-priced corporate lawyers had filed an ex parte restraining order against my personal assets. They fabricated a massive lie claiming I was a silent partner in one of his shell companies, attempting to embezzle funds from their upcoming $10 million deal. A corrupt judge had signed the temporary order pending a formal hearing. Effective immediately, all my personal funds were completely frozen. I could not withdraw cash. I could not write a check. I could not even buy a cup of coffee. Jamal anticipated that I might fight back. He knew that to fight a legal battle I would need money to hire my own attorney, so he ruthlessly cut off my access to my own legitimate salary. He was systematically isolating me, starving me of resources, and backing me into a corner where my only option would be to surrender the house to survive. "Are you listening to me, Natalie?" my father demanded, snapping me back to reality. "I swear if you ruined this for Brittany, you will no longer be my daughter." "You stopped being my father a long time ago," I said coldly. "And you can tell your visionary son-in-law he will need a lot more than a frozen bank account to stop me." I ended the phone call. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The audacity of their attack was breathtaking. Jamal was using the legal system as a weapon against me while actively running a criminal enterprise in the shadows. He thought without money or family support, I would simply collapse and hand over the keys to my inheritance. But Jamal did not understand the mind of a forensic accountant. I did not need money to destroy him. I just needed raw data. I slowly pulled out of the parking lot. I realized that fighting him from the outside was going to be impossible. His lawyers were too fast, and my parents were too deeply manipulated. If I wanted to find the smoking gun that proved he forged my signature and stole my identity, I could not do it from home. I had to get inside his operation. I drove straight back to my neighborhood, making sure no black vehicles followed me. I parked my car in my garage and lowered the heavy metal door. I locked every deadbolt and activated the perimeter alarms. I walked past the kitchen and headed upstairs to my secure home office. Before I physically walked into his operation, I needed to map the entire digital battlefield. I needed to know what I was walking into. I sat at my glass desk and booted up 3 high-performance monitors. I bypassed standard operating systems and launched my proprietary forensic tracking software. The screen glowed with a dark interface designed to hunt ghosts. I opened the encrypted files from the basement safe. I took the fake companies Jamal registered in my name and typed their employer identification numbers into the search matrix. The conflict was no longer a screaming match in my kitchen. It was a silent digital war. Jamal thought he was a financial genius. He layered the corporate entities perfectly, creating domestic shell companies owned by Delaware, holding corporations to obscure true ownership. It was a decent strategy to fool a local bank manager or a greedy family member, but he was an amateur playing in a professional arena against a woman who hunted billionaire tax evaders for a living. I isolated the initial loan disbursements. The commercial lenders released exactly $1.2 million into a primary checking account under my forged signature. If Jamal was developing a commercial apartment building, that money should have been wired to an escrow account or a licensed title company to purchase land or hire contractors. Instead, the money sat dormant for exactly 24 hours. Then it violently exploded outward into dozens of smaller, untraceable wire transfers. I watched the data flow across my screen. Jamal was using a classic money laundering technique known as smurfing. He broke the massive $1.2 million sum into endless microtransactions. Every single wire transfer was strategically kept just under the $10,000 federal reporting limit to avoid triggering automatic alerts with the Internal Revenue Service. He was bleeding my credit dry a few $1,000s at a time. I spent the next 3 hours running complex algorithms to catch and isolate every single one of those wire transfers. I watched the bright green lines on my digital map stretch aggressively across the globe. The stolen money bounced from the fake accounts in Chicago to a regional bank in Miami. From Miami, it jumped the border completely. I traced the digital breadcrumbs until they finally stopped. The bulk of the stolen funds landed in 3 separate offshore accounts located in the Cayman Islands. I cracked my knuckles and dug into the international corporate registry databases. It took me another hour to break through the privacy walls of the Cayman accounts. The registered agent for all 3 offshore bank accounts was a private wealth management firm called Apex Consulting. I pulled the public articles of incorporation for Apex. The sole managing director and primary beneficiary was listed clear as day. Jamal. He was not building a real estate empire. He was systematically draining the fraudulent loans he took out in my name and hoarding the cold, hard cash overseas where the United States government could not easily seize it. He was building an offshore escape fund. But as I reviewed the final ledger balance, a massive discrepancy caught my eye. He had moved $800,000 to the Cayman Islands, but the initial loan was for $1.2 million. There was still $400,000 missing from the digital map. I recalibrated the tracking software to search for domestic endpoints. The remaining funds did not go overseas. They were being funneled directly into a holding account registered to a heavily guarded cash checking business on the south side of Chicago. I ran the address through a federal watch list database I had access to through my corporate firm. The business was a known front for a highly violent underground loan shark syndicate. Jamal was not just a con artist stealing from his sister-in-law. He was a desperate man drowning in illegal gambling debts and borrowing money from dangerous criminals. He was using my stolen identity to pay off the mob. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, rubbing my burning eyes. I had completely mapped the flow of the stolen money. But as I closed the banking software, one final automated alert popped up on my screen. It was a recurring monthly draft that did not fit the money laundering pattern at all. It was a payment to a life insurance provider, and what I found inside that policy folder would change everything. I clicked the blinking alert and opened the digital folder. The life insurance policy was terrifying, but it was the account paying the monthly premiums that caught my immediate attention. The money was being drafted directly from the same exact holding account tied to the violent Southside cash checking business I had just identified, the syndicate. I routed my software to intercept the transaction ledgers of that specific holding account. I needed to see the complete financial relationship between my brother-in-law and the mob. When the decoded spreadsheet finally populated on my screen, I sat back in my chair completely stunned. Jamal was not just a casual borrower who got in over his head. He was trapped in a massive death spiral with a ruthless underground criminal organization. The ledgers showed a highly detailed history going back nearly 3 years. Long before he ever stole my identity, Jamal was taking massive predatory loans. The interest rates were completely illegal, sitting at an astronomical 40% compounding monthly. He had originally borrowed $500,000 to launch his initial real estate development firm, but the business was a total and absolute failure. He never built a single property. He never closed a single legitimate commercial deal. To keep up the facade of the wealthy entrepreneur, he simply kept borrowing more and more from the criminals. And keeping up appearances was Jamal and Brittany's full-time job. I opened a secondary window on my monitor and pulled up my sister's social media profiles. I wanted to see exactly how they spent the stolen money. I began cross-referencing her timeline of lavish posts with the date stamps on the fraudulent loan withdrawals. It was a perfect, sickening match. The exact week Brittany posted a series of photos from a luxury ski villa in Aspen, Jamal had withdrawn $50,000 from my stolen credit line. The day she showed off her brand new custom diamond tennis bracelet to her thousands of followers, he had finalized the lease on the 2 Porsches using my forged signature. When she posted a video touring a luxury yacht in Miami, the ledger showed a massive wire transfer to the Cayman Islands. They were completely broke. Their entire glamorous life was a meticulously constructed illusion. They did not own a single thing. Every expensive dinner at exclusive restaurants, every custom-tailored suit, every first-class plane ticket was paid for with my ruined credit score, and the dangerous money Jamal was constantly borrowing from the loan sharks. My parents worshipped Jamal because they thought he was rich. They handed him the keys to the family simply because he wore a heavy gold watch that I unknowingly paid for. They constantly belittled my honest career while worshipping a man who was nothing more than a glorified thief. But the forensic ledgers showed that the loan sharks were finally done playing games. Over the last 4 weeks, the syndicate had stopped lending him money and started aggressively collecting their debts. The digital trail revealed a series of brutal forced liquidations. The mob had already seized his original business bank accounts. They had drained his and Brittany's personal savings completely dry. He was entirely out of cash, and the syndicate was demanding a massive balloon payment of $800,000 by the end of the month. That was exactly why he needed my house this morning. The deed transfer my mother slammed on my kitchen counter was never meant to secure a legitimate $10 million corporate real estate deal. There was no $10 million deal. The entire upcoming corporate project was a complete fabrication designed to fool my parents and manipulate me into signing away my property. He was planning to hand the deed to my house directly to the syndicate to pay off his massive underground debts. If I had signed that piece of paper this morning, violent criminals would legally own my grandmother's home by tomorrow afternoon. Jamal was a desperate, cornered animal. The syndicate was breathing down his neck, threatening his life. He had exhausted every single financial avenue and completely ruined my credit in the process. But as I looked back at the recurring premium payment for the life insurance policy, the darkest piece of the puzzle finally clicked into place. If the syndicate took my house, they would only get a fraction of what he truly owed them when all the compounding interest was finally calculated. Jamal needed a much bigger payout to clear his debts entirely and escape the mob forever. I clicked on the beneficiary page of the insurance policy, and my blood ran absolutely cold. The name printed in bold black letters across the digital document was Brittany, my own flesh and blood. The life insurance policy was fully underwritten by a massive national provider, and the terms were spelled out in horrifying clarity. In the event of my unexpected death, specifically highlighting clauses for accidental death or homicide, the insurance company would immediately pay out a lump sum of $2 million tax-free. The sole and exclusive beneficiary was my sister. I stared at the screen as the true depth of their depravity washed over me. The policy had been activated exactly 3 months ago, right alongside the fraudulent commercial loans. They had used my stolen identity to forge the medical questionnaires and fake my signature on the primary consent forms. But it was the nightly phone calls that suddenly made my chest feel incredibly tight. Every single night at exactly 11 o'clock, my sister would call me. "Are you alone tonight, Natalie?" I always thought it was just her cruel way of mocking my single status, or trying to make me feel isolated. Then, after finding the safe, I assumed she was just acting as a lookout, making sure the house was empty so Jamal could sneak into the basement and retrieve his hidden documents. But the $2 million payout revealed a much darker reality. They were not just checking to see if I was awake. They were hunting for the perfect window of opportunity. Jamal was drowning in violent syndicate debt, and my house was not going to be enough to save him. He needed massive liquid capital. If I had answered the phone last night and told Brittany the truth that I was completely alone, Jamal would not have just broken into my basement to empty the safe. He would have broken into my bedroom. The heavy iron bolt cutters I saw him clutching on the security camera were not just for the steel hinges of the wall safe. They were a weapon. He was planning to kill me, stage the scene, to look like a violent home invasion gone wrong, and walk away clean. Brittany would play the grieving sister, collect the $2 million insurance payout hand, $800,000, over to the loan sharks, and keep the rest to fund her luxurious fake life. My own sister was actively orchestrating my murder. I pushed my chair back from the desk and stood up. My legs felt weak, but I refused to let myself collapse. A profound shift happened inside my mind in that exact moment. Any lingering feelings of family loyalty, any tiny shreds of sisterly love I still held on to, instantly evaporated. I was no longer dealing with greedy relatives or arrogant thieves. I was dealing with cold-blooded sociopaths who placed a literal price tag on my life. I paced the length of my home office formulating a plan. I had a mountain of physical evidence locked in my biometric safe, but I knew how the legal system worked. If I took this to the police right now, Jamal high-priced defense attorneys would spin a massive web of lies. They would claim I took out the loans myself to fund a secret gambling addiction. They would argue that I bought the life insurance policy to provide for my sister because I was depressed. Without a digital paper trail proving exactly which computers and IP addresses were used to forge those signatures, a corrupt judge might let them walk free on reasonable doubt. I needed the origin files. I needed the raw metadata proving that the fraudulent applications were submitted directly from Jamal Corporate Network. And I needed the internal emails or text messages between him and Brittany discussing the life insurance payout. That kind of bulletproof federal evidence was not sitting in my basement. It was locked inside the private servers at Jamal Lavish downtown real estate office. But because Jamal lawyers had successfully frozen all my bank accounts, I could not simply hire a private investigator or a cybersecurity firm to hack his network. I had to get inside that office myself. And there was only one way a paranoid criminal like Jamal would ever let me near his computers. I had to make him believe he had completely broken my spirit. I walked over to the bathroom mirror and splashed cold water on my face. I needed to look utterly exhausted and entirely defeated. I had to swallow my pride and play the role of the desperate victim begging for mercy. They thrived on my misery and their own massive egos. I was going to give them the greatest performance of my entire life. I grabbed my car keys and prepared to walk straight into the lion's den. I was going to give Jamal exactly what he wanted, complete and total surrender. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The drive to the Gold Coast neighborhood where Jamal and Brittany rented their extravagant penthouse felt like a march to the executioner. But I was not the one walking to the gallows. I was building the trap. To pull this off, I had to look like a woman whose entire world had just collapsed. I parked my car 3 blocks away from their luxury high-rise. I looked in the rearview mirror and aggressively rubbed my eyes until they were bloodshot. I wiped off my mascara, smudging it down my cheeks to make it look like I had been violently sobbing for hours. I messed up my hair and unbuttoned the top of my blouse so I looked completely disheveled. I needed them to look at me and see a pathetic, broken victim. I pulled into the polished marble driveway of their building. I ignored the valet and walked straight into the lavish lobby. Every crystal chandelier and velvet chair in this building was partially funded by my stolen identity. I stepped into the private elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to slow down. I was a forensic accountant. I was trained to sit across from hostile corporate billionaires and maintain absolute composure. Playing a crying sister was just another form of auditing. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a private vestibule. I walked up to their massive double oak doors, and instead of ringing the bell, I knocked weakly with a trembling fist. The heavy door swung open, revealing Brittany. She was wearing a silk designer robe, and holding a crystal glass of sparkling water. When she saw my smeared makeup and disheveled clothes, a wicked gleam of pure satisfaction flashed across her eyes. She did not ask if I was okay. She just crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. Jamal walked up behind her wearing expensive linen trousers and a smug expression. "What do you want, Natalie?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. I forced my lower lip to quiver. I let out a choked sob and buried my face in my hands. I surrendered completely. "You win," I cried, forcing my voice to crack and tremble. "You both win. My bank called me an hour ago. My accounts are completely frozen. I cannot buy food. I cannot pay my utility bills. I have absolutely nothing left." Brittany let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "We told you not to mess with Jamal," she sneered, taking a sip of her water. "You brought this entirely on yourself by being so selfish this morning." I looked up at them with perfectly manufactured terror in my red eyes. "I know," I whimpered loudly. "I am so sorry. I was just scared, and I did not understand the corporate paperwork. But I am terrified now. The bank said they are going to take the house anyway because of the legal injunction." Jamal stepped forward, his posture instantly shifting from defensive to dominant. He smelled blood in the water, and his massive ego could not resist gloating. "See, Natalie," he said smoothly. "This is what happens when you do not trust family. I told you I could protect the house." I nodded aggressively, letting more tears spill down my cheeks. "I will sign the deed transfer." I sobbed, wiping my nose with the back of my hand. "I will give you the house, Jamal. Just please call off your lawyers and unfreeze my accounts. I am begging you." Jamal smiled a cold, reptilian smile. "I cannot just unfreeze the accounts, Natalie. Legal injunctions take weeks to untangle. But if you sign the house over today, I might be able to help you out personally." This was my exact opening. The Trojan horse. I dropped to my knees right there on their expensive imported rug. "Then please give me a job," I begged, looking up at him with pathetic desperation. "You said your real estate firm is expanding. I am a certified accountant. Let me do your basic bookkeeping. I can process payroll or manage your low-level spreadsheets. Just pay me under the table in cash so I can eat and rent a cheap motel room until the freeze is lifted." Jamal looked down at me, his eyes wide with triumphant disbelief. The sister-in-law who always looked down on him was now literally on her knees begging to be his lowest-level employee. It was the ultimate power trip. He glanced at Brittany, who was smiling so hard it looked like her face might crack. "Get up, Natalie," Jamal ordered with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Be at my downtown office tomorrow morning at 8 sharp. Do not be late. We have a lot of numbers to crunch before my $10 million gala." I kept my head bowed and thanked him profusely, but inside my mind was stone cold. I was officially inside the fortress. I was officially inside the fortress. I slowly stood up from the expensive imported rug, keeping my head lowered and my shoulders slumped. I needed to maintain the illusion of total defeat for just a little while longer. But before I could turn around and walk out the front door, Brittany stepped directly in front of me. Her eyes were gleaming with a vicious kind of joy. She was not satisfied with just seeing me beg on my knees. She wanted to stretch this moment out and humiliate me. "You are not leaving yet, Natalie," Brittany said, crossing her arms. "If you are going to work for Jamal, you need to learn proper respect. You came into our home and acted like a complete psycho this morning. You owe us a genuine apology for being so selfish about that old house." I looked at my sister. The woman who had secretly taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on my life. The woman actively plotting my murder so she could buy more designer shoes. The sheer audacity of her demanding an apology took every ounce of my professional self-control. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste copper. "You are right, Brittany," I whispered, forcing my voice to sound completely broken. "I am so sorry. I was being selfish and narrow-minded. I should have trusted you and Jamal from the beginning." Brittany smiled a wide, venomous smile. "That is much better," she purred. "But words are cheap, Natalie. Since you are going to be Jamal's new low-level bookkeeper, you should get used to taking orders right now. Go into the kitchen and make us some coffee. Do not mess it up. Jamal likes his black, and I take mine with 2 packets of raw sugar and almond milk. I stared at her for a split second before lowering my gaze. I nodded silently and walked toward the massive open-concept kitchen. The kitchen was a masterpiece of modern design with white marble countertops financed entirely by the blood money Jamal was borrowing from a violent criminal syndicate. I found the expensive espresso machine and began brewing their coffee. My hands were shaking with pure suppressed rage. I wanted to smash the glass carafes against the marble island, but I meticulously prepared their drinks exactly as ordered. I carried the 2 steaming mugs back into the living room and placed them carefully on the glass coffee table. Brittany did not even say thank you. She just took a sip, waving her hand dismissively. Jamal sat down heavily on his leather sofa, looking at me like I was dirt on his shoe. "Listen to me very carefully, Natalie," he said using his most arrogant corporate voice. "I am doing you a massive favor by letting you step foot inside my firm. You will sit at the small desk in the back corner of the office. You will do exactly the basic data entry I tell you to do, and you will not speak to any of my important investors." "I understand," I said quietly, keeping my hands clasped in front of me. "Good." Jamal continued, taking a loud sip of his black coffee. "I will pay you a few $100 in cash at the end of every week. That should be enough for you to buy groceries and eventually rent a cheap apartment on the edge of town once the deed transfer is complete and the bank kicks you out of your house. Consider it an act of charity. But if you step out of line, I will throw you out on the street and let the legal injunctions starve you out completely. Do we have an absolute understanding?" "Yes, Jamal," I replied. "Thank you for the opportunity. Get out of my sight," he commanded. "Be at the office at 8 sharp." I turned and walked out of the luxury penthouse. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me. As I stood alone in the private elevator vestibule, the pathetic broken persona instantly vanished from my face. My posture straightened, and my breathing slowed to a calm, rhythmic pace. They thought they had completely broken my spirit. They thought they had turned the arrogant, independent sister into a groveling maid. They were absolutely blind to the reality of the situation. By forcing me to serve them coffee and verbally degrading me, they had completely let their guard down. They had just handed a highly trained federal forensic auditor the literal keys to their entire criminal enterprise. I pressed the button for the lobby and smiled. Tomorrow morning, I was going to tear their fake empire down from the inside out. The next morning, I arrived at the massive glass skyscraper, right in the heart of the financial district. Jamal rented the entire 42nd floor. Walking out of the elevator, I was immediately hit by the sheer magnitude of his financial illusion. The reception area was covered in imported Italian marble. There were massive flat-screen televisions displaying looping videos of luxury high-rises and architectural renderings of buildings he had absolutely no intention of ever constructing. It was a perfectly crafted theater designed to separate foolish investors from their money. A young receptionist wearing a headset pointed me toward the back of the office. I walked past a long row of empty glass conference rooms. Despite the massive square footage, there were only about 5 actual employees working in the entire firm. They were mostly junior analysts, aggressively making cold calls. Jamal did not build a legitimate real estate firm. He built a high-pressure boiler room. Jamal was waiting for me near the break room. He pointed to a small, cramped desk squeezed tightly between a loud copy machine and a towering stack of empty water jugs. "Sit there," he ordered, not even looking up from his phone. He dropped a thick stack of printed vendor invoices on the cheap laminate desk. "I want all of these manually entered into the master expense spreadsheet by noon. Do not talk to my brokers and do not wander around the office. You are here to do grunt work, Natalie. Nothing else." I sat down in the squeaky office chair and powered on the old desktop computer they provided. I kept my head down and began typing quietly. I needed to blend into the background completely. I needed to become an invisible piece of furniture so they would eventually drop their guard. Around 10 o'clock, the heavy glass doors to the main lobby swung open. Brittany strolled into the office like she owned the entire skyscraper. She was wearing a stunning white silk pantsuit and carrying a brand new limited edition Hermes Birkin bag. My chest tightened immediately. I knew exactly how much that bag cost because I had seen the specific charge on my ruined credit report yesterday afternoon. She was literally carrying $30,000 of my stolen credit on her arm. Brittany Clip clopped across the hardwood floor in her red bottom heels, making sure every single employee stopped to look at her. She walked straight past her husband glass office and headed directly for my tiny desk by the copy machine. She stopped right behind me, leaning over my shoulder. Her heavy floral perfume was completely suffocating. "Are you learning how to use Excel, Natalie?" Brittany asked loudly, ensuring the junior analysts nearby could hear her mocking tone. "Jamal is so incredibly generous giving you this data entry job. Most firms would require actual corporate experience, but he is always looking out for the less fortunate members of our family." I stopped typing and looked at the massive diamond tennis bracelet sparkling on her wrist, another luxury item I had unknowingly purchased for her. "Yes, Brittany," I replied, keeping my voice meek and defeated. "I am very grateful for the opportunity." She smirked, brushing an imaginary piece of lint off my cheap wool sweater. "Make sure you enter those numbers correctly," she said condescendingly. "We cannot afford any mistakes. Jamal is closing his $10 million round of funding on Friday, and the investor gala needs to be absolutely flawless. Now be a good sister and go fetch me a sparkling water from the fridge." I stood up obediently and walked to the break room. I grabbed her water and handed it to her. She took it without a single word of thanks and strutted into Jamal Corner office, shutting the heavy glass door behind her. I sat back down at my desk, watching them closely through the transparent walls. Jamal was pacing aggressively back and forth while speaking on his cell phone. He looked incredibly stressed. 10 minutes later, he slammed his phone down on his desk, grabbed his tailored suit jacket, and stormed out of the office. Brittany followed him out, holding her expensive designer bag. "We have a sudden lunch meeting with the caterers for the gala," Jamal yelled out to the sales floor. "I will be back in 2 hours. Do not let the phones ring." The heavy lobby doors closed behind them. I waited exactly 5 minutes. The junior analysts were completely absorbed in their cold calls, wearing heavy noise-canceling headsets. The receptionist was eating a salad at the front desk, completely ignoring the security monitors. The floor was effectively mine. I stood up and casually walked over to the copy machine, pretending to check the paper tray. I glanced around the open floor plan. No one was looking in my direction. I slipped quietly away from my desk and walked straight toward Jamal Corner office. I pushed the heavy glass door open and slipped inside, pulling it shut behind me. His massive mahogany desk was cluttered with glossy marketing brochures, but his master computer terminal was sitting right in the center, powered on and completely unlocked. Jamal was so arrogant he did not even bother to set a basic password screensaver. He thought he was entirely untouchable. I reached into the pocket of my slacks and pulled out a small black flash drive. This was not a standard storage device. It was a custom encrypted forensic extraction tool I built specifically for corporate espionage audits. I plugged the drive directly into the back of his massive desktop tower. The screen flashed black for a split second before a hidden command prompt opened. I typed in a rapid sequence of override codes, bypassing his standard antivirus software. The green progress bar appeared on the screen, moving at a terrifyingly slow pace. I was not just copying his spreadsheets. I was actively cloning his entire internal server. I was pulling the raw metadata, the hidden IP logs, the deleted emails, and the exact digital signatures he used to forge my loans. I kept my eyes locked on the glass walls of the office, watching the elevator banks in the distance. If Jamal came back early, I was entirely trapped in his office. The green progress bar inched forward with agonizing slowness. 92%. 95%. I kept my eyes completely glued to the heavy glass doors of the office suite. If Jamal or Brittany stepped off that elevator, I would have absolutely no excuse for sitting behind his mahogany desk. The hard drive clicked quietly. 99%. Finally, a small green checkmark flashed across the monitor. I instantly pulled the encrypted flash drive from the back of the computer tower and slipped it deep into the pocket of my slacks. I closed the hidden command prompt, leaving the computer screen exactly as I had found it. I practically held my breath as I quickly walked out of his glass office and slipped back behind my tiny desk in the corner. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out my personal tablet, hiding it carefully behind the massive stack of vendor invoices Jamal had ordered me to enter. I plugged the flash drive directly into the tablet port and booted up my forensic decryption software. I did not have time to review all 100 gigabytes of his stolen corporate data, but I needed to verify the smoking gun right now. I bypassed his standard financial ledgers and dug straight into the network metadata. I was looking for the exact digital footprints left behind when they stole my identity. I opened the secure folder containing the original commercial loan applications and the $2 million life insurance policy. When you sign a legal document electronically, the software automatically records the unique IP address of the device used to submit the signature. Jamal thought he was untraceable because he used fake shell companies, but he was incredibly sloppy with his digital hygiene. I ran the attached IP addresses through my tracking matrix. The numbers did not point to an offshore server or a secure proxy. They pointed directly to the exact wireless network inside Jamal and Brittany Luxury Penthouse. I dug even deeper, pulling the device registration logs. The unique media access control address for the computer that submitted the fraudulent signatures belonged to a rose gold laptop. It was Brittany's personal computer. My sister was not just a passive beneficiary enjoying the stolen money. She was the one actively executing the identity theft. Brittany sat on her velvet couch and personally typed my name into the life insurance portal. She clicked the button, verifying the fraudulent medical history. She legally committed massive federal wire fraud with her own two hands. I took highly detailed screenshots of the network logs and locked them into my secure cloud server. The Federal Bureau of Investigation would not need to guess who committed the crime. The math proved it was her. I continued sifting through the cloned server and noticed a hidden folder labeled Temporary Audio Files. It was an automatic backup of the internal voicemail system tied to Jamal Direct office line. I put in my wireless earbud and clicked on the most recent audio file. It had been left at 2 a.m. the previous night. A rough, gravelly voice filled my ear. "Jamal, you are out of time," the voice warned. "We are not granting any more extensions, and we do not care about your fake real estate gala. You owe us $800,000 by Friday midnight. If that money is not wired into our holding account, we are going to put you in the ground. You have 3 days. Do not make us visit your beautiful wife." The audio file clicked off, leaving me in complete silence. My blood ran ice cold. The syndicate was not making idle threats. They were promising absolute violence. Jamal was a walking dead man if he did not produce the cash. This explained his frantic behavior and his desperate attempt to steal my grandmother's house this morning. But more importantly, it proved exactly why Brittany called me last night to see if I was alone. They needed my $2 million life insurance payout to save their own lives. They were planning to kill me before the Friday deadline. I quickly unplugged my tablet and shoved it deep into my bag just as the main elevator chimed loudly across the lobby. I grabbed a stack of invoices and began typing rapidly into the basic spreadsheet Jamal had given me. I needed to look like the perfect broken employee. The heavy glass doors swung open, but it was not Jamal or Brittany returning from their lunch meeting. I looked up and saw my mother Susan striding into the reception area holding a designer shopping bag. She bypassed the receptionist completely and headed straight toward my desk. My mother stopped right in front of my cramped desk and dropped a massive Chanel shopping bag onto the floor. She looked around the bustling office with a bright, proud smile on her face. She was completely intoxicated by the illusion of wealth Jamal had created. She wore a tailored wool coat and her hair was perfectly styled. She looked like a woman who had finally achieved the high society status she always craved. "What are you doing here, Mom?" I asked, keeping my voice low and my eyes fixed on the computer monitor. I kept my hands resting flat on the desk, but my left knee was pressed firmly against my leather tote bag. Inside that bag, my tablet was currently establishing a secure connection to my encrypted cloud server. I just needed to transfer the final batch of offshore routing numbers I had extracted from Jamal Network. This data was the ultimate key. It proved exactly which Cayman Island accounts held the stolen loan money. "I came to bring my wonderful son-in-law some lunch," Susan announced loudly, ensuring her voice carried across the open floor plan. The junior analysts taking a break near the water cooler turned their heads to listen. "I bought him that expensive sushi he loves from downtown. And I wanted to see how you were adjusting to your new reality, Natalie. I wanted to make sure you were actually working and not just wasting his time." "I am adjusting fine," I replied mechanically. I reached my left hand down into my bag under the guise of grabbing a pen. My fingers found the smooth glass screen of my tablet. I swiped right, opening the hidden transfer portal. I needed 30 more seconds to lock the files. Susan let out a dramatic sigh and leaned against the edge of my cheap laminate desk. "I really hope you are paying close attention to how Jamal runs this incredible firm," she said, gesturing grandly at the empty glass conference rooms. "This is what true success looks like, Natalie. He is a genuine visionary. He is closing a $10 million investment round this Friday. Do you have any idea how much intelligence and business acumen it takes to secure that kind of capital in this economy?" I knew exactly what it took. It took stealing your sister-in-law identity, forging federal loan documents, and borrowing money from violent street thugs who were actively threatening to put him in the ground. But I simply nodded, keeping my expression blank. "Yes, Mom, yes." "He is very ambitious." "Ambitious is an understatement," she scoffed, crossing her arms tightly. "Jamal is building a legacy for our family. You spent all those years in college bragging about your grades. You were so incredibly proud of that measly accounting degree. You thought you were so much smarter than everyone else because you could balance a spreadsheet and audit a tax return. And look exactly where it got you. You are sitting in the dark corner of his office doing menial data entry because you completely ruined your own finances." Every single word she spoke was like a physical blow. She was my mother. She was supposed to protect me. Instead, she was standing in a fake office praising the man who was actively planning to murder me for a life insurance payout. She looked down at me with absolute pity and disgust. The Chanel bag resting by her feet was undoubtedly paid for using my stolen credit line. She was accessorizing her life with my absolute destruction. "You should be down on your knees thanking him every single day for giving you this job." Susan continued, her voice dripping with cruel satisfaction. "If he had not taken pity on you after the bank froze your accounts, you would be sleeping on the street right now. I hope this humbles you, Natalie. I really do. I hope you finally realize that your little corporate investigations and your forensic accounting degree were a complete waste of time compared to real-world business strategy." I looked up at her perfectly powdered face. I wanted to scream the absolute truth. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and tell her she was blindly worshipping a violent criminal who owed money to the mob. I wanted to show her the $2 million price tag her golden child had placed on my head, but I knew the emotional satisfaction of screaming at her would destroy my federal case. I had to remain the broken victim. I had to let her win this meaningless battle so I could win the entire war. "You are right, Mom," I said softly, forcing myself to look entirely defeated. "I have a lot to learn from Jamal. I am very lucky he let me work here." Susan smiled a triumphant, glowing smile. She reached down and patted me on the head like a disobedient child who had finally learned their lesson. "I am glad you are finally seeing reason," she said, picking up her designer shopping bag and the expensive sushi. "Tell Jamal I stopped by. I have a spa appointment to get to before the gala preparations begin." I watched my mother turn around and walk proudly out of the glass office doors. She did not even say goodbye to me. The second the heavy elevator doors closed behind her, I dropped my hand back down into my tote bag. I tapped the screen of my tablet and hit download on the final batch of offshore routing numbers. The progress bar flashed green, indicating the transfer to my secure server was 100% complete. I had every single piece of federal evidence I needed. I quickly unplugged the connection cable from my tablet and slipped the device back into the hidden compartment of my heavy leather tote bag. I pulled the zipper shut just as a sharp, aggressive voice cut through the low hum of the open office. "What exactly are you running on that terminal?" I froze. I slowly turned my head and looked up. Standing right over my desk was a tall, lanky man wearing a dark gray polo shirt with the company logo embroidered on the chest. A silver name tag identified him as Kevin, the Director of Information Technology. He was staring intensely at a digital tablet in his hands. The screen displayed a network monitoring dashboard flashing with a red warning banner. I noticed a massive data pull originating from this specific IP address. Kevin said, his eyes narrowing with deep suspicion. "You just pulled down over 100 gigabytes of raw data from Jamal Master Terminal." The server firewall flagged it as a highly unusual bulk transfer to an external cloud location. "What did you just download from the private network?" My heart began to hammer violently against my ribs, but my face remained perfectly calm. I knew I had only seconds to defuse the terrifying situation before he locked down the network and alerted Jamal. If Kevin physically searched my bag and found my tablet, the entire operation would instantly collapse. I needed to use my corporate auditing background to overwhelm him. I sat up straight in my squeaky chair and looked him dead in the eye. "I am running the mandated Internal Revenue Service compliance backup for the quarter," I stated using a flat, authoritative tone. Jamal instructed me to mirror the federal tax ledgers and compile the SOC2 compliance redundancies before the big investor gala on Friday. Kevin frowned, looking back down at his network dashboard. Jamal did not submit an IT ticket for a massive data mirror. He argued, but his voice wavered slightly. "And why would an entry-level bookkeeper be running a federal compliance extraction? That is supposed to go through my department." I let out a loud, exasperated sigh, mimicking the exact arrogant tone Jamal used on me earlier that morning. "Do you really want to interrupt Jamal's private lunch meeting to ask him why he delegated the financial audit prep to a certified forensic accountant?" I asked, raising one eyebrow. "If you want to take over the responsibility of compiling the offshore ledger reconciliations and the tiered entity tax declarations for the federal auditors, you are more than welcome to do it, Kevin. I can give you the raw files right now, and you can explain to Jamal why the redundant tax archives are delayed before his $10 million pitch." I gestured toward my computer screen, which was currently displaying the boring vendor invoices Jamal had assigned me. I made sure to throw in enough high-level financial jargon to make him second-guess his own authority. Technology directors absolutely hate getting tangled up in complex federal tax liabilities. It carries massive legal and financial risks. Kevin hesitated. He looked at my screen, then back at his tablet. The blinking red alert was still active, but his confidence was rapidly fading. "Are the extracted files secure?" he asked, finally taking a step back. "They are heavily encrypted and sitting in a closed-loop federal compliance vault." I lied smoothly without breaking eye contact. "The bandwidth spike you just saw was simply the automated compression protocol, finalizing the archive batch. It will not happen again today." Kevin nodded slowly, clearly, not wanting to step on the toes of the boss during a high-stakes funding week. "Fine," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. "But next time you run a massive redundancy check, warn my department first, so I do not chase down false alarms." He turned around and walked back toward the server room. I let out a sharp breath. My hands were shaking so violently I had to hide them under the desk. The close call was a blaring alarm bell. I had pushed my luck to the absolute limit. I had the offshore routing numbers, the forged signature network logs, the threatening syndicate voicemail, and the $2 million life insurance policy. There was nothing else I needed from this fake company. I looked at the digital clock on the wall. It was nearly 2 in the afternoon. Jamal and Brittany would be returning from their lunch meeting at any moment. I grabbed my tote bag, slinging it over my shoulder. I did not bother turning off the desktop computer. I walked straight past the glass conference rooms and stepped directly into the lobby elevator. As the heavy metal doors slid shut and the elevator began its descent to the ground floor, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had the complete federal dossier safely secured. Jamal thought he was a brilliant criminal mastermind, but he had just allowed a federal auditor to walk right out the front door with the weapon needed to destroy him. It was time to prepare for the gala. The elevator doors slid open to the subterranean parking garage. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust and damp concrete. My footsteps echoed loudly off the gray walls as I walked toward my car. I was running mental calculations on how long it would take to compile the raw data into an undeniable federal reporting package. I was so completely focused on the digital evidence locked inside my bag that I did not hear the heavy footsteps approaching me from the blind side. Natalie! The sharp, echoing voice cut through the silence. I stopped dead in my tracks and turned around. Jamal stepped out from the dark shadows of a massive concrete support pillar. He had clearly been waiting for me. He was not wearing his tailored suit jacket anymore. His tie was violently loosened and his collar was unbuttoned. He looked completely different from the arrogant CEO pacing around the glass office upstairs. He looked like a man who knew his time was rapidly running out. He closed the distance between us, stepping squarely in front of me and blocking my path to the driver's side door. "Leaving early on your first day?" He asked, his eyes darting around the empty garage to make sure we were completely alone. The fluorescent lights flickered above us, casting dark shadows across his face. I gripped the strap of my leather tote bag, pulling it tighter against my shoulder. The flash drive inside felt like a loaded weapon pressing against my ribs. "I finished the data entry," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly submissive but steady. "My mother said you were in a long lunch meeting, so I thought I would just head home and get out of your way." He did not care about the spreadsheets. He stepped even closer, invading my personal space. His expensive cologne could not mask the sour metallic smell of stress sweat radiating off him. "Friday is exactly 48 hours away, Natalie," he said, his voice dropping into a harsh, gravelly whisper that echoed the exact tone of the loan shark from the audio file. "The investor gala is on Friday night. I am securing a $10 million check from the top angel investors in the city, but to clear the final underwriting, I need that collateral finalized. I need the signed deed to your house." I knew exactly what he was actually saying. Friday night was the absolute deadline the violent syndicate gave him. If he did not hand over the deed to my house by midnight, they were going to kill him. And if he failed to get the house, he and Brittany were going to execute me for the $2 million insurance payout. My life and his life were hanging on the exact same 48-hour timeline. He was backed into a corner and he was trying to drag me down with him. "You have had 2 days to feel what it is like to have absolutely nothing." Jamal continued, pointing a heavy, shaking finger directly at my chest. "Your bank accounts are frozen solid. Your credit is completely ruined. You cannot even buy a tank of gas without begging me for pocket cash. Do you really want to live the rest of your life like a homeless beggar? All you have to do is sign the property transfer paper. If you bring the signed deed to the gala on Friday night, I will call my corporate lawyers and drop the legal injunction. I will give you your miserable life back." He expected me to cry again. He expected me to drop to my knees on the dirty concrete floor and thank him for his incredible mercy. He wanted to see the absolute terror in my eyes. But something profound shifted inside me. The fear was completely gone. I was standing face to face with a monster who actively plotted my murder, but I was holding the key to his federal prison cell right in my bag. I looked at his bloodshot eyes and his trembling hands. He was not a mastermind. He was a pathetic, terrified amateur playing a game he could not win. Slowly, a genuine smile spread across my face. It was the first real smile I had worn since this nightmare began. It completely caught him off guard. He blinked, taking a half step back as the submissive victim facade briefly slipped away. "You are absolutely right, Jamal," I said, my voice crystal clear and entirely devoid of fear. "I am tired of living like this. I want this nightmare to be over just as much as you do." I reached out and pulled the handle of my car door. "I will be at the gala on Friday night. I promise you. I will walk right through those double doors and I will bring you exactly what you deserve." Jamal stared at me, a flicker of deep confusion crossing his face before his massive ego quickly covered it up. He smirked, believing he had finally broken my stubbornness. "Make sure you dress appropriately," he sneered, turning away. "It is a high-class event." I got into my car and started the engine. He had no idea that the high-class event he was throwing was about to become the largest federal crime scene in Chicago. I drove my car out of the dark parking garage and merged smoothly onto the busy concrete interstate. I did not go back to my empty house. I drove straight to a secure 24-hour printing facility. Over the next 48 hours, I barely slept. I methodically transformed the stolen hard drive data into a meticulously organized weapon of absolute financial destruction. As a forensic accountant, I knew exactly how federal agencies operated. If you hand a detective a messy pile of spreadsheets, they will put it in a box for 6 months. But if you hand them a fully audited and cross-referenced financial dossier, they will mobilize a strike team immediately. Friday morning arrived with a cold, biting wind sweeping off the lake. It was the day of the gala. Jamal was expecting me to show up at his office, but I simply turned my phone off. I carefully dressed in a sharp black business suit and securely grabbed 2 heavy leather briefcases from my dining room table. I was bypassing the local police department entirely. Local cops do not have the resources to untangle offshore Cayman Island accounts. I needed the heavy hitters. My first stop was the regional headquarters of the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. Their criminal division is filled with the most ruthless financial hunters on the planet. I walked through the security scanners and requested an emergency meeting. Because I presented my professional auditing credentials, they escorted me into an interview room within 10 minutes. A senior agent named Davis walked in and sat across from me. He looked overworked and highly impatient. I did not waste his time with an emotional story. I simply unlocked the first briefcase and slid a thick bound binder across the metal table. "I am reporting a massive money laundering operation and tax evasion scheme," I stated, keeping my voice professional. "Inside that binder, you will find the exact routing numbers for 3 offshore Cayman Island accounts holding stolen commercial loan funds. You will also find the internal network logs proving the creation of 5 fraudulent shell companies. The perpetrator is Jamal, and he is soliciting $10 million from legitimate angel investors tonight at the luxury hotel downtown." Agent Davis opened the binder. His impatient expression instantly vanished. As he flipped through the perfectly color-coded tabs and the authenticated digital network logs, his eyes went wide. "You compiled all of this yourself?" he asked, looking up in absolute shock. "I am a certified forensic accountant," I replied. "He stole my identity to fund this operation, but I am not done." I left the IRS building an hour later, knowing they were drafting asset seizure warrants. My next stop was the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office. The IRS handles the money, but I needed the FBI to handle the syndicate threats and the conspiracy to commit murder. I sat down with a federal agent in the cybercrimes division. I handed over the second leather briefcase. This one contained the audio recording of the loan shark threatening Jamal. It also contained the network logs proving my sister Brittany forged a $2 million life insurance policy on my life. I explained how Jamal was backed into a corner by the underground syndicate and planning to use my death to pay off his massive illegal debts. The FBI agent listened to the chilling audio recording of the mob threat. The room fell completely silent. "We need to pull you into protective custody immediately, Natalie," the agent said, leaning forward. "If he owes the syndicate $800,000 by midnight, your life is in imminent danger." I shook my head firmly. "I am not hiding in a safe house," I said. "Jamal thinks he has completely broken me. He thinks I am bringing the signed deed to my house to his gala tonight. If I do not show up, he will panic and run. You have the coordinates of his offshore accounts and the proof of his federal wire fraud. If you want to catch him red-handed, you need to let me walk into that gala tonight." The agent looked at the mountain of irrefutable evidence. He picked up his desk phone and dialed his supervisor. "We are going to need a massive tactical strike team tonight," he said into the heavy black receiver. I walked out of the federal building as the sun began to set, casting long, dark shadows over the city streets. The trap was officially set perfectly in motion. The federal government was locking its jaws around Jamal and Brittany. All I had to do now was go home, put on a beautiful evening gown, and deliver the final crushing blow in front of everyone they desperately wanted to impress. I went back to my quiet house and opened my closet. I bypassed the flashy sequined dresses my sister Brittany always pushed on me. Instead, I chose a tailored emerald green evening gown. It was incredibly simple but perfectly cut. I paired it with my grandmother vintage pearl necklace and classic black heels. I did not need to wear stolen diamonds to command a room. I looked at myself in the mirror. The exhausted, terrified victim was gone. The woman staring back was a federal auditor, ready to execute a hostile takeover. I drove my sedan to the magnificent luxury hotel downtown. The entrance was blocked by a long line of expensive limousines. I handed my keys to the valet and walked slowly up the grand marble staircase toward the main ballroom. The double mahogany doors were propped wide open. A literal red carpet had been rolled out for the wealthy investors. I stepped inside, and the sheer scale of the financial illusion took my breath away. Jamal had spared absolutely no expense. Massive crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the room. Waiters in crisp white tuxedos carried silver trays loaded with premium champagne and expensive caviar. In the center of the room stood a massive ice sculpture carved into the shape of a towering skyscraper. It was a monument to his fake real estate empire. Every single flower arrangement, every glass of champagne, and every hour of the string quartet playing softly in the corner was paid for with the dirty money he owed to violent criminals. I scanned the crowded room. It did not take long to spot Jamal. He was standing near the front stage, entirely surrounded by a large group of wealthy older angel investors. He was wearing a custom-tailored black velvet tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand while gesturing enthusiastically with the other. He flashed his charismatic smile, laughing loudly at a joke one of the investors made. To the untrained eye, he looked exactly like a highly successful African-American visionary who had conquered the Chicago real estate market. But I could see the tiny beads of sweat forming on his forehead. I noticed how his eyes constantly darted toward the entrance. He was terrified. He was waiting for me. A few feet away from him, my sister Brittany was holding court with the wives of the investors. She looked absolutely ridiculous. She was wearing a massive silver couture gown that looked like it belonged on a Hollywood movie premiere rather than a corporate charity gala. Her neck and wrists were completely dripping in heavy diamond jewelry. The sparkling stones caught the light from the chandeliers, blinding anyone who looked directly at her. She threw her head back and laughed a fake hollow laugh that echoed loudly across the room. She was living her ultimate fantasy, entirely unaware that the federal government was already preparing her prison cell. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter and slowly made my way into the massive crowd. I did not rush. I let my quiet confidence radiate. The stark contrast between their stolen flashy wealth and my understated elegance was impossible to ignore. As I moved closer to the stage, Brittany finally spotted me. Her fake smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she quickly masked it with a look of pure, arrogant triumph. She leaned over and whispered something into Jamal's ear. Jamal snapped his head in my direction. The immense relief that washed over his face was almost pathetic. He thought my presence guaranteed his survival. He quickly excused himself from the group of millionaire investors and walked purposefully toward me. He grabbed my elbow a little too tightly and pulled me away from the crowd toward the heavy velvet curtains near the side stage. "You actually came," Jamal whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and absolute relief. His velvet tuxedo jacket smelled faintly of expensive scotch and profound fear. "I told you I would bring exactly what you deserve," I replied smoothly, locking eyes with him. I kept my face perfectly neutral, betraying absolutely zero emotion. "Did you bring the signed property deed?" he demanded, his grip tightening slightly on my arm. "My investors are getting restless. I need to show the lead underwriter that I have the physical collateral secured before I go up on that stage and ask for the $10 million check." I reached into my small black evening clutch. I let my fingers brush against the heavy encrypted flash drive resting at the bottom. "I brought everything I need for tonight," I said, pulling my arm away from his desperate grip. "Just make sure the projector screen behind the stage is working perfectly, Jamal. I want your investors to see the absolute truth about your company." He smiled arrogantly, completely misunderstanding my words. "Oh, do not worry, Natalie," he sneered. "The presentation is going to be absolutely flawless. Now go stand in the back and stay out of the way. I am about to make history tonight." Jamal turned on his heel and walked briskly toward the stage area, leaving me standing near the heavy velvet curtains. I watched him go, knowing he was walking straight into a federal trap. I took a deep breath, preparing to move toward the back of the room where the audiovisual equipment was set up. But before I could take a single step, a sharp, manicured hand clamped down hard on my wrist. It was my mother, Susan. Her eyes were wide with a frantic, nervous energy. Right behind her was my father, Richard, his face flushed red from the expensive scotch and the high-stakes atmosphere. Before I could say a word, they both pulled me roughly behind the heavy velvet curtains and pushed me through a set of double doors into a dimly lit private coat room. The heavy doors clicked shut, muffling the elegant string quartet playing in the main ballroom. The air in the small room smelled of expensive leather wool and the suffocating floral perfume my mother always wore. "What on earth are you wearing, Natalie?" my mother hissed, looking me up and down with absolute disgust. "I specifically told you this was a black tie event for the financial elite. You look like a cheap secretary attending a holiday party. Look at your sister out there. Brittany is dressed like royalty. She commands respect from every single billionaire in that room. You are purposely trying to embarrass us in front of these important people with your pathetic little thrift store dress." I smoothed the high-quality fabric of my emerald green gown. "I am dressed perfectly fine, Mother. I am not here to put on a fashion show for you or anyone else. I am here to finish my business with Jamal and be done with it." My father stepped forward, cornering me against a long rack of expensive cashmere coats. "Do not take that disrespectful tone with your mother," he snapped, pointing a thick, heavy finger right in my face. "We do not care about your petty jealousy tonight. Jamal just texted me saying you finally brought the collateral. Hand it over right now. I am going to personally deliver the signed deed to his lead investor before he gives his keynote speech. I want those men to know that this family firmly stands behind his visionary projects." I gripped my small black evening clutch tightly in both hands. The heavy encrypted flash drive was hidden safely inside, right next to a folded white envelope. The envelope was completely empty, but they did not need to know that. "I am not giving you anything," I said, keeping my voice low and dangerously calm. "Jamal and I had a very specific agreement. He gets the envelope exactly when he makes his presentation. Not a single second before." My mother let out a loud, exasperated groan, throwing her hands up in the air in a dramatic display of frustration. "You are being completely impossible," she practically screamed. "You are standing in a room full of millionaires, and you still want to play these pathetic little control games. Jamal is giving you a massive chance to save yourself from total bankruptcy. He is letting you keep that low-level accounting job at his firm even after you disrespected him in his own home. You should be kissing the ground he walks on, Natalie. If you ruin this $10 million deal for your sister because of your stubborn pride, I will personally make sure you are cut out of this family forever. I looked at the two people who were supposed to love and protect me unconditionally. They were literally foaming at the mouth to hand over my grandmother's house to a violent criminal. They had traded their own daughter for the fake illusion of status and wealth. There was no sadness left in my heart. There was only a cold, clinical clarity. I looked my father dead in the eye. "You do not have to worry about cutting me out of the family, Dad," I said, stepping away from the coat rack and closing the distance between us. "Because after tonight, this family is not going to exist anymore." My father's face turned a deep shade of purple. His jaw clenched in pure rage. He reached his hand out aggressively, trying to snatch the black clutch right out of my grasp. "Give me the damn envelope, Natalie!" he roared. I swiftly dodged his heavy hand and pushed past him. I grabbed the brass handle of the courtroom door. "I am walking out of this room right now," I said, looking back at them one last time. "If either of you tries to grab me again, I will walk straight out the front doors of this hotel, and Jamal will never get what he needs to save his life. You can go sit at your VIP table and watch the stage. He is going to get exactly what he deserves." I pulled the door open and stepped back out into the bright, sparkling ballroom, leaving them standing in the dark. My mother was sputtering with rage, but they did not dare follow me or cause a massive public scene. I quickly blended into the crowd of wealthy investors moving systematically toward the back of the room. The keynote speech was scheduled to begin in exactly 10 minutes. I needed to find the audio-visual control room and completely hijack the system before Jamal stepped up to that microphone. I slipped out of the courtroom hallway and merged back into the edges of the main ballroom. The atmosphere was actively shifting. The soft music of the string quartet faded into silence as the lead violinist lowered his bow. A smooth voice echoed over the surround sound system, asking the guests to please take their seats for the evening keynote address. The wealthy investors and their wives began moving toward the front rows of white folding chairs arranged neatly before the glowing stage. Waiters in white tuxedos expertly collected empty champagne flutes and cleared the aisles. I stayed entirely in the shadows, keeping my back pressed against the ornate wallpaper as I circled the perimeter of the massive room. I was looking for the nerve center of the entire production. Behind a heavy velvet curtain near the kitchen entrance, I found exactly what I was looking for. A solid black metal door with a small silver plaque that read "Audio-Visual Staff Only." I glanced over my shoulder to make sure no hotel security guards were watching. The hallway was completely empty. I grasped the cold metal handle, turned it firmly, and pushed the heavy door open. I slipped inside and quietly clicked the door shut behind me. The environment shifted instantly. The room was dark and cramped, smelling strongly of ozone and hot electronics. Several large racks of servers hummed loudly, masking the noise of the crowd outside. A massive bank of glowing monitors displayed various camera angles of the ballroom and the main stage. Sitting in a rolling chair in the center of the control board was a young technician wearing a black polo shirt and heavy noise-canceling headphones. He was tapping frantically on a keyboard, queuing up Jamal's glossy corporate presentation. He caught my movement in his peripheral vision and spun around in his chair, pulling his headphones down around his neck. His eyes widened in surprise when he saw a woman in an emerald green evening gown invading his secure workspace. "You cannot be in here, ma'am," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "This is a restricted area for the technical staff. You need to go back out to the ballroom before I call hotel security." I did not argue with him, and I did not look intimidated. I walked purposefully toward his control board, radiating absolute corporate authority. I reached into my evening clutch and bypassed the heavy flash drive. Instead, my fingers found the crisp folded $500 bill I had withdrawn specifically for this exact moment. I pulled the cash out and slapped it flat onto the desk right next to his computer mouse. Jamal sent me. I lied smoothly, projecting total confidence. There has been a massive last-minute change to the corporate presentation. I am the lead financial auditor for the firm, and I need to personally plug my encrypted drive into the main projector feed to display the confidential financial collateral for the investors. It contains highly sensitive bank data, and Jamal wants a certified accountant running the slides. The young technician looked at the $500 bill resting on his desk. He was probably making minimum wage working a Friday night shift. He looked back up at me, completely unsure of what to do, but I did not give him time to think. "Take the cash and go take a 30-minute coffee break," I commanded, looking him dead in the eye. "Tell your manager the client demanded direct control of the presentation laptop for security reasons. Jamal will back you up. Now take the money and leave." The technician hesitated for a fraction of a second before quickly snatching the $500 bill and shoving it deep into his pocket. He grabbed his water bottle and walked past me toward the heavy metal door. "Just make sure the input cable stays locked to channel 1. He mumbled before slipping out into the hallway. The second the door clicked shut, I reached out and threw the heavy metal deadbolt, locking myself securely inside the room. I was completely isolated. No one could stop me now. I stepped up to the massive control board and took a deep breath. I pulled the secure tablet from my clutch and connected the main projection cable directly into my device. I took the encrypted flash drive containing all the federal evidence and plugged it in. My screen instantly mirrored onto the small preview monitor on the desk. I had complete and total access to the massive screens mounted behind the stage in the ballroom. Through the tinted observation glass of the control room, I looked down at the massive crowd. Jamal was walking up the steps to the stage, smiling broadly at the wealthy investors sitting in the front row. The lead investor, an older man with silver hair, was holding a massive novelty check written out for $10 million. Everything was perfectly in place. Jamal reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. I placed my finger hovering directly over the enter key on my tablet, ready to drop the absolute truth on his fake empire. Down in the massive ballroom, the crowd erupted into thunderous applause as Jamal leaned into the microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight." He began, his voice echoing smoothly through the expensive surround sound system. He sounded so incredibly confident, playing the role of the self-made visionary perfectly. "We are standing on the precipice of a massive shift in the Chicago real estate market. My firm has spent the last 3 years acquiring prime commercial zoning, and tonight, with your partnership, we begin building a legacy that will define this city for generations." The wealthy investors sitting in the front row nodded enthusiastically. My parents were seated at a prime VIP table right near the stage. My mother was literally glowing with pride, wiping a fake tear from her eye. Brittany sat next to her, adjusting her heavy diamond necklace and smiling for the professional photographers snapping pictures of the event. They were completely soaking in the glory of their stolen empire. Jamal continued his charismatic speech, spinning lies about sustainable architecture and community development. He hit every single corporate buzzword with practiced perfection. Finally, he turned his attention to the silver-haired man sitting in the center seat. "And now I would like to invite our lead underwriter up to the stage," Jamal announced, gesturing grandly. "He has been a true believer in our vision since day one, and tonight he makes that vision a reality." The older gentleman stood up, buttoning his tailored suit jacket. He walked up the short flight of stairs holding the massive, oversized novelty check. The numbers printed across the glossy surface were staggering. $10 million. The crowd began to clap again, a slow-building applause that filled the entire room. The professional photographers rushed to the front of the stage, raising their expensive cameras to capture the historic handshake. Jamal reached his hands out, his face split into a massive, triumphant grin. He was exactly 2 seconds away from grabbing the literal lifeline he needed to pay off the syndicate and save his own life. I pressed the enter key on my tablet. Inside the dark control room, the massive cooling fans on the server racks whirred loudly as my encrypted files bypassed the standard presentation software. Down in the ballroom, the giant, high-definition LED screens mounted directly behind the stage suddenly flickered. A loud, sharp burst of digital static hissed through the surround sound speakers, causing several guests in the front row to physically jump in their seats. The elegant gold and black corporate logo of Jamal Real Estate Firm instantly vanished from the massive screens. The ballroom fell into a sudden, confused silence. Jamal froze, his hands still suspended in the air, reaching for the check. He kept his charismatic smile plastered on his face and let out a light, rehearsed chuckle. "It seems we are having a slight technical difficulty tonight," he said smoothly into the microphone. "Please give my audio-visual team just a second to fix the presentation slides." But it was not a technical difficulty. It was an execution. The massive LED screens flashed bright white, illuminating the entire ballroom in a harsh, sterile glare. The first image that popped up was not a rendering of a luxury high-rise. It was a massive high-resolution screenshot of a text message exchange. The letters were blown up so large that even the people standing by the coat room in the very back could read them perfectly. The text message from Jamal read, "I need one more week, please. The $10 million deal closes on Friday. I will have your cash." The response from the unknown number flashed on the screen in bright red letters. "You are out of time, Jamal. We do not care about your fake gala. You owe the syndicate $800,000 by midnight Friday. If the money is not in our Cayman account, we are going to bury you." A collective gasp ripped through the crowd of wealthy investors. The lead underwriter slowly lowered the $10 million check, staring up at the screen in absolute horror. Jamal spun around to look at the massive display. The blood instantly drained from his face, leaving him looking completely pale. "Turn it off!" he screamed, his smooth corporate voice entirely shattering into pure panic. "Cut the power to the screens right now! Somebody cut the power!" But I was safely locked inside the control room, and I was just getting started. I tapped the screen of my tablet, advancing to the next slide. The terrifying text messages vanished and were immediately replaced by the heavily audited federal loan documents. The screens displayed the $1.2 million in commercial debt. Right next to the massive loan amount was the forged signature. And right next to that was the digital network log, proving the IP address originated directly from Brittany's personal laptop. The absolute truth was 50 feet tall. I pushed away from the control board and unlocked the heavy metal door of the audio-visual room. I walked calmly down the darkened side aisle and stepped directly into the blinding lights of the main stage. The entire ballroom was in a state of chaotic shock. Wealthy investors were standing up, pointing at the massive screens and murmuring in disbelief. I walked straight up the short flight of stairs and approached the podium. Jamal was completely frozen in place. His mouth was hanging slightly open and his hands were trembling uncontrollably. He looked like a terrified child caught in a lie he could not escape. I did not even look at him. I reached out and gently took the microphone right out of his shaking hand. I turned to face the crowd of elite investors. The room instantly fell dead silent. Everyone was waiting for an explanation. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice echoing cleanly across the massive ballroom. "My name is Natalie, and I am a certified federal forensic accountant. The man standing next to me is my brother-in-law, Jamal. For the past 3 years, he has been pitching you a vision of a massive real estate empire. But as the verified federal documents on the screen behind me prove, he has never built a single property. This entire firm is a meticulously constructed shell game designed to steal your capital." I tapped the wireless tablet in my hand, advancing the slides on the massive LED screen. A complex web of digital transactions appeared, connecting fake domestic limited liability companies to offshore bank accounts. Jamal is currently $1.2 million in debt. I continued pacing slowly across the stage, commanding the room completely. But he did not borrow that money from a legitimate bank under his own name. He stole my social security number. He forged my signature. He completely destroyed my financial identity to fund every single thing you see in this room tonight. The expensive champagne you are drinking, the crystal chandeliers hanging above your heads, and the velvet tuxedo he is wearing right now. All of it was paid for with stolen money that he illegally laundered through Cayman Island holding accounts. The silver-haired lead investor took a step back, clutching the $10 million novelty check to his chest, like a physical shield. He looked at Jamal with absolute disgust. Jamal tried to speak to defend himself, but only a pathetic stammer escaped his dry lips. He had absolutely nowhere to run. But identity theft and federal wire fraud are just the beginning. I said, my voice growing louder and more commanding. I tapped the tablet again. The financial ledgers vanished and were replaced by the official internal documents from the violent underground syndicate. Because Jamal is not just a corporate con artist, he is a desperate man drowning in illegal gambling debts. He currently owes a highly violent underground loan shark syndicate $800,000, and that debt is officially due tonight at midnight. The crowd gasped loudly. Several wives in the front row physically pulled their husbands back away from the stage, realizing they were in the presence of extreme danger. My parents were sitting entirely frozen at their VIP table right in the center of the room. My father looked like all the air had been violently sucked out of his lungs. My mother stared up at the massive screen with her mouth wide open, entirely unable to process the absolute destruction of her perfect high society fantasy. Her golden child was a fraud. I turned my attention away from the wealthy investors and looked directly down at my sister. Brittany was sitting at the table, nervously clutching her heavy diamond necklace. The smug, arrogant expression she had worn for her entire life was completely eradicated. She looked like a trapped rat. If you are wondering how Jamal planned to pay off the violent mob when his bank accounts are completely empty, I have the answer, I said, pointing directly at my sister. I tapped the screen one final time. The massive display lit up with the $2 million life insurance policy. My exact legal name was listed as the primary insured. Brittany was listed as the sole and exclusive beneficiary. 3 months ago, my own sister secretly took out a massive life insurance policy on my life. I said, locking eyes with Brittany as the entire ballroom turned to stare at her. The payout is $2 million in the event of an accidental death or homicide. Every single night this week, Brittany called my house right before midnight to ask me if I was home alone. She was not checking on my well-being. She was checking to see if the house was clear so her husband could break in and stage a violent robbery. The silence in the ballroom was absolutely deafening. The wealthy elite were staring at my sister as if she were a literal monster hiding in a designer gown. They were not just going to steal my grandmother's house. I declared, my voice ringing with absolute finality over the speaker system. They were actively conspiring to murder me so they could pay off their syndicate debts and keep the rest of the blood money to fund their fake luxurious lifestyle. The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. For a split second, nobody moved. Then a piercing, guttural scream ripped through the silence of the ballroom. It was Brittany. The perfect facade she had spent her entire adult life building completely shattered in an instant. She kicked off her red-bottom heels and charged blindly toward the stage. Her silver couture gown ripped at the seams as she scrambled up the short flight of stairs, screaming obscenities at the top of her lungs. "You ruined everything!" she shrieked, her face twisted into a mask of pure feral rage. "You jealous, pathetic loser! I am going to kill you!" She lunged at me with her hands outstretched, aiming directly for my throat, but I did not even flinch. Before she could cross the final few feet of the stage, 2 massive hotel security guards intercepted her. They grabbed her by the arms and violently pulled her backward. She thrashed wildly against their grip, her heavy diamond necklace snapping and scattering expensive stones all over the polished wooden floor. "Let me go," she howled, kicking her bare feet at the guards. "This is my company. She is lying. She is completely insane." Jamal finally snapped out of his paralyzed state. He saw his wife being dragged off the stage by security, and realized his entire world was completely evaporating. He rushed forward and grabbed the edge of the wooden podium, desperately trying to address the panicked crowd. "Please listen to me," Jamal yelled, waving his hands frantically at the wealthy investors who were already backing away from the stage. "This is a massive misunderstanding. The woman standing next to me is a highly disgruntled former employee. We fired her yesterday for gross incompetence, and she is executing a malicious cyber attack to ruin my corporate reputation. Those documents are completely fabricated. She hacked our internal network to project a fake smear campaign." He looked directly at the silver-haired lead investor, who was still standing near the front row holding the massive check. "Please, sir," Jamal begged, his voice cracking with sheer desperation and raw fear. "You know my character. You know my grand vision for this city. Do not let a crazy, jealous woman destroy years of hard work and planning. We are going to build a legacy together. The numbers add up perfectly in my official ledger." The silver-haired man looked at Jamal and then looked up at the massive LED screen, still displaying the irrefutable network logs and the chilling syndicate death threats. He was a seasoned billionaire who had survived decades in the cutthroat financial sector. He had a team of top-tier lawyers and risk assessors. He knew exactly what a bulletproof federal audit looked like, and he knew exactly what a cornered criminal sounded like. He did not say a single word to Jamal. He did not argue or demand an explanation. Instead, he looked down at the massive $10 million novelty check he was holding in his hands. With a slow, deliberate motion, the lead investor grabbed the top edge of the glossy cardboard check and ripped it violently right down the center. The loud tearing sound echoed sharply through the silent, tense ballroom. He tossed the two torn halves onto the floor right at Jamal's feet. Then he buttoned his tailored suit jacket, turned his back on the stage, and began walking briskly toward the main exit doors. That single silent action triggered an absolute avalanche. The rest of the wealthy angel investors immediately stood up from their tables in a state of sheer panic. Wives grabbed their expensive designer purses, and husbands ushered them quickly toward the double mahogany doors. No one wanted to be in the same room as a desperate man who owed nearly $1 million to a violent underground mob. They were fleeing the sinking ship as fast as they physically could. "Wait!" Jamal screamed, his voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers as he leaned over the podium. "Please do not leave. The deal is still good. The land is secure. I can explain everything to you in private." But nobody was listening to his pathetic lies anymore. The grand ballroom, which had been filled with the absolute pinnacle of Chicago high society just minutes ago, was rapidly emptying. The waiters in their white tuxedos retreated quickly into the kitchen, abandoning their silver trays. The string quartet packed up their instruments and fled the room. The grand corporate illusion was completely broken. The fake real estate empire that Jamal had built on the back of my ruined credit score was collapsing in real time, right in front of my eyes. I stood calmly on the stage, watching the absolute destruction unfold. Jamal dropped to his knees, staring blankly at the torn pieces of the check on the wooden floor. His breathing was shallow and rapid. He realized that without that $10 million investment, he was a dead man walking. Midnight was rapidly approaching, and the violent syndicate was waiting for their cash. My mother and father were still frozen at their VIP table, entirely alone in a sea of empty white chairs. They were staring up at me with expressions of pure absolute horror. They finally realized they had sacrificed their actual daughter to protect a monster. But the night of justice was not completely over yet. Before my parents could even process the magnitude of the disaster, the heavy mahogany doors at the main entrance burst open with terrifying force. A loud, booming voice commanded everyone to freeze. The flashing red and blue lights of dozens of emergency vehicles reflected through the tall glass windows. Over 30 federal agents wearing heavy tactical vests stamped with FBI and IRS criminal investigation swarmed into the grand ballroom. They moved with absolute military precision, blocking every single exit and securing the perimeter in a matter of seconds. Federal agents. "Nobody move." The lead agent I had spoken to earlier that afternoon shouted, stepping onto the red carpet. Jamal did not even try to run. He was completely paralyzed, staring at the federal agents closing in on him from all sides. Two massive agents rushed the stage, grabbing his arms and violently slamming him face down against the wooden podium. The loud metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs echoed across the silent room. Jamal, you are under arrest for massive federal wire fraud, money laundering, and operating an illegal financial enterprise. The agent stated loudly, pressing his knee into Jamal's back. You have the right to remain silent, and I highly suggest you use it right now. Down on the floor, Brittany was still fighting with the hotel security guards. When she saw the federal tactical teams, she finally realized she could not talk or scream her way out of this nightmare. She tried to rip her arm away and sprint toward the kitchen doors, but two female FBI agents instantly intercepted her. They tackled her to the polished hardwood floor, her expensive silver couture gown tearing completely up the side. "Get off me!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with pure panic. "Do you know who I am? We know exactly who you are, Brittany." One of the female agents replied, yanking her arms roughly behind her back and snapping the handcuffs tight over her wrists. "You are under arrest for aggravated identity theft, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. You are looking at a minimum of 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Now get up." They hauled my sister to her feet. Her perfect blonde hair was a tangled mess, and her expensive makeup was completely smeared down her face from her hysterical crying. Seeing their golden child in handcuffs finally broke the spell over my parents. My mother let out a blood-curdling scream and sprinted toward the stage, followed closely by my father. They completely ignored Jamal, who was already being dragged out the side door by the IRS agents. They ran straight past the FBI securing the room and threw themselves at the foot of the stage, looking up at me. My mother was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "Natalie, please," she begged, reaching her shaking hands out toward my shoes. "Please tell them to stop. Tell them it is a massive misunderstanding. She is your sister. She did not mean any of it. She just got caught up in a bad situation with her husband." My father grabbed the edge of the stage, tears streaming down his flushed face. "We will give you the house," he cried out, his voice pathetic and weak. "We will never ask you for anything ever again. We will pay you back every single cent they took. Just tell the agents you made a mistake on the audit. You can fix this, Natalie. You are smart. You can make this go away. Please do not let them take our little girl." I stood at the edge of the stage looking down at the two people who brought me into this world. They were still trying to manipulate me. Even after seeing the irrefutable proof that Brittany was actively planning my murder, my parents were still trying to sacrifice my life to save hers. They did not care about the trauma I endured or the massive financial ruin I faced. They only cared about protecting their perfect image and saving the daughter they actually loved. I did not feel angry anymore. I just felt completely empty. I stepped back away from their reaching hands. "I am not fixing anything," I said, my voice completely calm and devoid of any emotion. "The federal agents have all the evidence. I gave them everything. Your little girl is going to spend the rest of her life in a federal cell. Natalie, you cannot do this to us." My mother wailed, collapsing onto the floor in a heap of expensive silk. "We are your family. We chose you. We always loved you." I looked my parents dead in the eye, staring right through their pathetic, fake tears. "No," I replied softly but firmly. "You backed the wrong child." I turned my back on them. I walked slowly down the side stairs of the stage and walked straight down the center aisle of the ballroom, passing the federal agents securing the remaining evidence. I did not look back at my screaming mother or my sobbing father. I walked out the heavy mahogany doors, leaving the ruins of their fake empire entirely behind me. 6 months have passed since that incredible night. Today, I am standing on the wraparound balcony of my brand new penthouse condo, looking out over the beautiful Chicago skyline. The cold, biting winter wind has finally been replaced by a warm summer breeze. I take a deep breath of fresh air, and for the very first time in my entire life, my chest feels completely light. There is absolutely no anxiety. There is no heavy shadow of expectation hanging over me. There are no midnight phone calls checking to see if I am alone. I am alone, and it is the most magnificent feeling in the entire world. The federal justice system moved with terrifying speed once the agents had my raw data. Jamal did not even make it to a jury trial. When the prosecutors laid out the massive mountain of forensic evidence, his lawyers immediately advised him to take a blind plea deal. He is currently facing 20 years in a maximum security federal prison for wire fraud, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. Because the FBI intercepted the syndicate funds, he no longer has to worry about the violent loan sharks collecting their debt. The government effectively saved his life by locking him in a concrete cage. My sister Brittany did not fare any better. She tried to play the innocent, manipulated wife, but the digital IP logs and her forged signatures on the life insurance policy completely destroyed her fake defense. She is currently sitting in a federal penitentiary, wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. There are no luxury vacations or designer bags where she is going. My parents absolutely destroyed themselves trying to save her. They took out massive second mortgages and completely drained their retirement accounts to hire high-priced defense attorneys. They failed miserably. They are now completely bankrupt, living in a tiny rented apartment. They try to call me from different phone numbers, but I have them permanently blocked. The financial nightmare Jamal created was completely erased. Because I provided the Internal Revenue Service with the exact offshore routing numbers to recover the stolen commercial loan funds, I was officially classified as a federal whistleblower. Under the Federal Reward Program, I received a massive percentage of the recovered assets. I used the whistleblower reward to completely clear my name and restore my pristine credit score back to an immaculate 810. I did not keep my grandmother's house. I hired a private contractor to fix the basement wall Jamal destroyed, and then I sold the property to a lovely young family who will actually appreciate it. I took the profits from the sale and the massive reward money and bought this stunning downtown penthouse entirely in cash. I do not owe a single dime to anyone. I am completely debt-free and financially untouchable. People often tell you that family is absolutely everything. They say blood is thicker than water and that you have to forgive your relatives no matter what they do to you. That is a toxic lie designed to keep you trapped in a miserable cycle of abuse. Family is not defined by biology or shared DNA. Family is defined by mutual respect, unwavering support, and unconditional love. The people who share your blood should be your loudest cheerleaders, not your secret executioners plotting your downfall in the dark. If someone constantly belittles your accomplishments, steals your peace, or makes you feel incredibly small, they do not deserve a seat at your table. It does not matter if they are your mother, your father, or your sister. You have the absolute right to stand up, walk away, and aggressively protect your own life. You do not owe anyone your sanity or your financial security. It takes immense courage to sever ties with the people who raised you. It is a painful and lonely process, but the profound freedom waiting on the other side is worth every single tear. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own life? Have you ever had to build your own sanctuary when the people who were supposed to protect you tried to tear you down? I would love to read your stories of survival and strength in the comments below. Please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you believe in standing up for yourself. Thank you for listening to my journey today. Never let anyone convince you that you are the villain for simply protecting your own peace. The most profound lesson we can extract from Natalie's harrowing journey is that shared DNA does not automatically earn someone a lifelong pass to disrespect, manipulate, or destroy you. For generations, society has aggressively pushed the narrative that blood is thicker than water, conditioning us to endlessly forgive toxic family members simply because we are related. Natalie's story violently shatters that dangerous illusion, exposing how the concept of family obligation can be weaponized. Throughout the ordeal, Natalie's parents and sister used their biological ties as a mechanism for control. They demanded she sacrifice her home, her financial security, and ultimately her very life, all under the twisted guise of family duty. They expected her to play the obedient silent victim because she was conditioned to accept the role of the scapegoat. However, Natalie's ultimate victory was not just recovering her stolen identity or watching her abusers face federal prison. Her greatest triumph was the psychological liberation of severing those toxic ties without a single ounce of guilt or regret. Her journey teaches us that true family is defined by consistent actions, mutual respect, and unwavering support, not by a birth certificate. When the people who are supposed to protect you become the exact monsters you need protection from, walking away is never an act of betrayal. It is an act of profound self-preservation. You do not owe anyone your peace of mind, your hard-earned success, or your sanity just because you share the same last name. Building your own sanctuary surrounded only by those who genuinely value your worth is the highest form of self-love. If you have ever had to make the incredibly difficult choice to cut off toxic relatives to protect your own life, please share your story of survival in the comments below.